Someone else's turn now.
Oh, gosh. I could not compare to that. That was amazing. Thank you, Jen.
There's none. Not anymore.
Okay. Dad, thank you for just being you. You're one of those special people who made the world a better place just by being in it, and you'll be sorely missed. You had a gentleness and kindness about you that put people at ease. You never lifted your voice at us that I can remember. Yep. When you had to do, it was always done with a firm but kind manner. To me, you demonstrated how to be a friend and how to care for others. You demonstrated patience, faithfulness, humility, self-control, which 56 years later I'm still lacking. You were always patient with me, always took time to listen and to encourage, even when I couldn't tell the time. We were only allowed to get a watch when we were able to tell the time with an analytical watch, and I just couldn't do it. And he bought me a digital watch so that I could tell the time. I was graduated to an analog much later. I remember you teaching me how to ride my first bike, your patience and your guidance through the years, how you simply reprimanded me when I lost my first job, but you still loved me. You always encouraged me, whatever I did. You had a very dry but funny sense of humour, and very corny at times, but always managed to make us laugh or groan, depending on the situation. You taught us the value of hard work, and we earned our pocket money by doing jobs around the farm. Thank you, Dad, for the wonderful life we got to live. All the fun times we had as a family on different farms we grew up, whether it was docking lambs, shearing sheep, playing in the hay barn, or out on the farm where we'd come out on the tractor to help or hinder you in your work, and much later when we were old enough, tramping. You loved the mountains. That was your happy place. You taught us to love them too, and you instilled in us a love for nature. Thank you for all the love and care you showed us over the years. It's your turn to rest now, Dad. I love you.
Okay, so things that Dad taught us, things that Dad taught us to love, things that Dad loved. He brought us along on his journey. So Dad loved words. He's certainly passed that on, hasn't he? And wait till you hear Geoff. He loved us to take. He loved to take the long way around to say something. He never came up with just a no or a yes. It would normally be, oh, I think we could probably come up with something that might work. It did get him into trouble as he became unwell and lost his ability to get all his words out, because he'd get stuck halfway and would never ever get to the point. His wordplay and his puns were legendary, as were his one-liners. He loved telling stories, word painting the pictures he had in his head, and his hand would be drawing it out in front as he talked. We learnt the process of building a house. Mum and Dad doubled the size of our house, and they did most of that work themselves. So we learned the difference between studs and dwangs or knobs, rafters and purlins, skirting and architrave, about building paper and jib stopping and how to hang wallpaper. And these skills have come in useful time and time again, and it's so nice not to sound like a complete Egypt when you're talking to your own tradies. Music. We all learned instruments when we were at school, but listening to the classical collection that Mum and Dad had built up taught us the complexity of melody and rhythm and harmony. You get more than 3-part harmony with full orchestra, and we would internalise these, and so music was just in our heads, in our hearts. I love the way music speaks there. Has its own language. You'll notice that the music we're playing today is not elevator music. Dad taught us to love music that grabs you here and takes you running along the journey with it. He loved early starts and frosty mornings, and we learnt to, because it always meant the best day. It meant waking with the bird song and learning the difference between a tui and a bellbird, or the delight in hearing the car screeching overhead, or a kereroo kind of crash landing into a tree nearby. Getting out of the tent into the frost and with a hot bowl of porridge that Dad always made, hot porridge on a tramping trip. And you watch your foggy breath mixing with the steam. It gets you to your destination earlier enough in the afternoon to drop your pack, which made you feel like you're going to fly, and explore, catching crawlies in the streams or climbing the nearest rocky outcrop for yet another vista, playing with the weka or the kia that came to steal what they could from the campsite. I remember Mum spending all afternoon hunting down one of my jandals that had disappeared very early on before we'd dropped our packs. The earliest I recall, the earliest start, was a 4 a.m. This was a trip that Geoff and I did with Dad in Mount Aspiring National Park. There was a full moon lighting up over the snow-capped Mount Ionia. And this day took us up onto one glacier as the sun was just rising, ascending through glistening ice castles as the sun was coming down in a blue sky, over the pass and down another glacier, tumbled with broken blue ice, rising again off the glacier onto a ridge to a camp by a sun-warmed tarn or pool, surrounded again by the silence of these massive peaks. 15 hours of utter magic. Only possible because Dad had the skills to teach us, and he coached us all the way along. He taught us to love mountains. He taught us how to walk up hills, even when we were kids on the whole country farm. Slow and steady wins the race, said the tortoise to the hare. That got stuck in our head, and, walk with your heels and not with your toes. So we could walk up anything. And he'd encourage us, though we learned never to trust it. It's just around the next corner, just over the next knoll. Yeah, you're right. But it took time to hike up onto that ridge and then across to the next one and up to the summit over the bush line, where then you knew it was worth it because the whole world was opened up in front of you. The most incredible memory was on a walking trip, tramping trip south from Nelson Lakes. We're surrounded by rocky peaks, having come over one ridge, down into a valley, and back up onto another rocky area with peaks literally circling us. And there was a beautiful rocky mountain lake, and a lone seagull calling. It's just eerie. And the late afternoon, the sun was still hitting as the purple clouds with a storm were rolling in. We hunkered down in the tent as the storm hit, while Dad was outside with a pickaxe. I don't even know if he had a pickaxe. He might have just been using a stone just to dig a trench around the tent to keep the water out. We were sort of feeling the water under the ground sheet, and he was digging it out. We were counting the seconds between the flashes of lightning and the thunder, and they were getting closer and closer as the storm went right over us. And then as it cleared, there was a spectacular rainbow came right down into the Twin Peaks, opposite of where we'd just come down the pass that morning. He taught us to wonder, really to wonder about what we were seeing in life and what we're experiencing. So thanks for taking us on the journey, Dad. Thank you.
That's great. So well said. So many memories. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here again. This isn't easy. Gotta find my voice here. Dad, who can forget the twinkle in the eyes that lit up the face as a tale unfurled? Wit served aplenty round the dinner table, and no eye left dry, bellies aching. You gifted us with laughter, eyes that so effortlessly bled, tender tears of empathy, hands ever keen to help a stranger, and never, never an ill word spoken. You gifted us with kindness, unfaltering, unconditional, a steadfast companion, a son, a brother, a spouse, a father, a friend. You gifted us with faithfulness. Dream a dream and then make it real. Meticulous, skillful. Play the music, sing the song. Write the poem, craft the wood. You gifted us with creativity. Explore the world and do it again. Climb high where few have been. Feel the thrill of discovery. Breathe in nature's embrace with every step. You gifted us with adventure. You ran the race. You scaled the mountain. You loved deeply. You loved well. You live on in each of us. Now, go get some rest, Dad. We love you.
Not much to fill in, is there? Just a few things from the first job Roger ever had was buying tallow for a soap factory in Petone. He also ended up at Gracefield Laboratory testing cheese content for export, and he never lost the ability to grade the cheese that he was eating. He finally went into Ministry of Works drafting, and he ended up doing jobs on the Nandi airport in Fiji, Transmission Gully, which had started at that point, and they were buying land and had everything organised then, way back then. Nothing done, of course. And eventually, because there was not a lot of work going on, they sent him down to Roxburgh, and he did the as-built as the dam was being finished. So his drafting skills were really good, because they used to spend a lot of time practicing lettering and figures and everything else. So that came later, when we were engaged. He changed to doing building inspector, and in those days it was everything, health, for the whole community, testing hotels, regulations, and all the building, and he handled all the plans and would often help people get over problems. There was no charge in those days. He had the whole plan there, and worked pretty well with most of the builders, and water sampling all around the country. He had the whole of the South Wairarapa under his job. So he would check all the communities and the school water supplies and take them up to Masterton Hospital to get tested, checked. And then amalgamation of all the local authorities started. And he took one look at the computers that were coming into the office and the girls practicing all sorts of things, and he said, no way am I touching this. How am I going to get plans on those things? He was a hands-on person, and he just worked with the guys, and so he said, no, I've had this, I'm finished. So that was when we got the opportunity of doing volunteering over in Papua New Guinea. And that was quite a change and an eye-opener to the sorts of things that go on in these countries. He ended up with a massive World Bank and EU money pouring into the country, because it was, that stage was so rich in gold and silver and goodness knows what. And they were putting a lot of money into this education system, the health system, and he was in charge of that for a while. But going on around him, of course, was a jungle of people who fought over the slightest thing. We had a few tribal fights going on around us, and they would burn things and So when we got out 6 years later, things were deteriorating quite a bit. And that followed by a couple of years in Malawi and working on hospitals, maintenance, and again the pollution and the sort of deceitfulness going on within the communities was amazing. Stuff would just finish, or we might have a whole list of things to buy, and he would get half of them, say like he would get the nails and no wood. That it was in a stage where he couldn't actually do much work. And so after that we came back home and sort of semi-retired. We had someone else grazing what was left of the farm. And that's when we did other jobs, like going up to help them in when the easterly hit the north of Palmerston North, that area, and all the trees were flattened because they were all used to a southerly wind. And so we spent 2 weeks up there helping farmers get back on their fences back, and lots of bonfires. And yeah, and parallel to all this was in the 70s, the charismatic movement hit the Wairarapa where we were, and became involved in the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship. And that took us into all sorts of conferences and speakers from all over the world. And then towards the end of our time in the Wairarapa, we did about 15 or 20 years working in the Rimataka prison under the Full Gospel to start with, and gradually going on a Sunday to two different units, and then things changed gradually. They were getting a lot tougher, and it was getting a lot harder. And then we had all these tests and examinations we had to do to qualify every year, going through health and police checks and goodness knows what. And then finally Roger lost the ability to drive, so that's when we moved up here to a different environment. Having been out in the open most of our lives, it was quite hard coming into a village situation with people everywhere. So it's great to be able to get out on the farm sometimes with Jenny, and nothing but the hills. Yeah, but it's been a very varied life, and had lots of fun, and we really enjoyed it. So one of the things that we had a neighbour called Red Cairns, and they used to do a few things together down there. One day Red decided he wanted a tree dropped, and so they went down and worked it out, and this was with axes. Might have had a saw, but there was certainly no chainsaws then. And they scarfed it correctly, and they lined it up with the gateway. And perfect. They got it all down, the tree was falling, and suddenly they looked and said, "We forgot to open the gate." So there was a splintered. And the other thing with them is an old house. They had an old septic tank, and their house cow went through the roof. Well, they rang Roger to come and help, and it was quite a battle to try and get a cow. Fortunately, she had some horns, so they were finally able to extract her from this little box where she was trapped. Yeah, but we had, lots of little bits and pieces like that kept us all going. But the tramping was his mainstay. He just loved it. When he was out on the hills in the summer sun, he would often travel mentally through a trip that he'd done. He had an amazing ability to memorise places that he'd been. He always looked both ways, because just in case you have to go back, you have to know where you're going. And he seemed to record many of these places. He did a trip from Shoreman to Kaitoke, which is the full length of the Tararuas. He wanted to get a record, and the record was under 24 hours, day and night tramping. And he memorised and measured every climb so that he knew exactly how many 1,000 feet he had to work. And he took off. I palmed the kids out that day, and they went to different places, and I stopped off at Holsworth because the weather was packing up just in case he came out short, but he didn't. He kept on going, and there was screaming winds and moonlight, of course, because you have to travel by moon. And he got through, I think it was in 28 hours. He sort of dozed off in one of the huts on the way through and lost a couple of hours and think, oh, what have I done? But he just thrived on a challenge. And it didn't matter where he came, he just kept going. That'll do.
So what time to do something else now?
You're going to play a tune.
Oh, okay.
Stay here.
You can, or you can go sit down, it doesn't matter.